like to contact the show, send us an email at liveonfourlegspodcast@gmail.com or get involved in the conversation on social media. Join the Pearl Jam Podcast community group on Facebook or follow us on Twitter at liveonfourlegspod.
Hey, I see some good requests out here. I just want to let you know, this set list was not made earlier in the day. It was not made yesterday. It was made at 4 in the morning one of the last few days. So this is one of those after midnight set lists. I hope you like it. And away we go.
You're listening to Live on Four Legs, the live Pearl Jam podcast experience, featuring
Mr. Stone Gossard. Gentlemen! Mama Queen! Matt fucking Cameron in the drum. Mr. Boom Gasper! You can call me Al, you can call me Ed, you just fucking call me, why don't you?
Hey everybody now, welcome to Live on Four Legs, a definitive live Pearl Jam podcast. And it's that time. We are currently in December, the last month of the year, which always happens to be the month where everything is being put into perspective. What happened over the last 11 months? What can we go back to and say, hey, this from this Pearl Jam tour was important because of this? And that's what this month is about, because every single episode that we do in the month of December will be focusing on a 2024 show from every leg. And to start, we're starting in May. That's, I think, pretty obvious that you got to start there. All of these are done via vote on Facebook and on Patreon, and we have our episode picked for next week as well. The week after that will be very interesting because that is going to be the second leg of the U.S. tour, which I think has a lot more meat on the bone to it than some of the other legs do, especially the Europe leg. But what was picked for this episode was Vegas Night 1. And I get that it was picked. I think it's a pretty good pick. I come from a little bit of a bias thinking that maybe Seattle 1 had a little more of a chance or deserved a little bit more of a chance to get up there, but that's not what you guys thought. You guys, it was pretty, not unanimous, but it was pretty close. It was a route there that you guys wanted Vegas 1 to be covered. And you can tell if you look up and down the set list, especially for very early in the tour, this was really the first time in the 5 shows that they started to play around, that they said, all right, this song here, mix it up here. Let's try different things and let's be unpredictable. It is one of the more unpredictable shows of, if not the year, then definitely the leg. So we got some things to talk about and we're just going to run it all down. Randy Silbel over here. Javier Hervas, Mr. Guru, is over there.
How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to get to these shows that we've just witnessed in the last couple of months. It'll feel very fresh, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, agreed. Especially with having like a younger side of the tour, like the first leg, and just kind of hear how the songs grow over time, which is always very exciting.
Yeah, this is, I think we talked about this before we started recording. This is so early in the Dark Matter stuff that this stuff was continuing to evolve at the time. When you look at it, we also mentioned this, that this is the first show where the first 4 songs of the album were slightly broken up a little bit. So they kind of said, all right, here's some changes that we can make, but they kind of stuck with the method of Scared of Fear, React, Respond, Wreckage, and then before Dark Matter, they went into Daughter instead. And it's the formula that was working for them at the time. But also when you listen to these songs, you can kind of tell knowing what we know now, like, okay, what's going to excel, what needed a little bit more time to marinate. And I think that's a really good indication of what this year would end up being at the end.
Absolutely. Some of the songs, I think they grew up so much over time. Personally, Wreckage is one of my favorites because I think that the melody is absolutely gorgeous. But the songs that you can hear in the set too is Upper Hand, I think, is a really good version of it, but it's still not there yet. It's kind of like still baking. But then when you go to Waiting for Stevie, it's just an absolute banger. So there's a few examples that we can go back and forth while we cover the show, but it's funny just to go back and revive the excitement of like how excited we were just to hear the new stuff live and see those songs grow and just now to hear what they have become.
Well, yeah, and I mean, again, the evolution kind of comes in all different facets here because when you look at the set list, 8 of the 11 Dark Matter songs were played and they were still super hyped and super excited about it. And this is kind of a trend for them as time goes on in a tour year. It turns from 8, then it goes down to 6 after a little while, then it goes from 6 to about 4. And that's really what we started to see towards the end. Some songs that got shuffled in and out. Like Upper Hand is a really good example of one that I think only got played once in Australia. I think that they really weren't playing Running a whole lot. They weren't playing, obviously, Something Special and Won't Tell were not played at this show, but Won't Tell kind of got a tick up. Something Special kind of stayed where it was. But even something like Scared of Fear, one of the things that I had about Scared of Fear at the show is that this almost fell out of favor just a little bit because when you think about the way that the song kind of introduces the section, there were times where if they didn't want that breakup to feel like it was sectioned out, they would just go right from song number 4 into React Respond. And that gave you a different dynamic in the set that didn't necessarily say, here's Dark Matter, here's Dark Matter coming up. It was just like another song was being played. I think that intro before Scared of Fear does so much to introduce you to that section. And I think that was a main aspect of what they wanted to display very early on that didn't totally go away, but it wasn't the staple that it was at this point. Didn't turn out to be that way.
Also, when it comes to the visuals too, in the first part of the tour, that's when you get the first taste of what the new stage was going to be too. Like you said, when you hear the intro and when you go to Scared of Fear, also you're seeing something that the band didn't use in the past, something that it was absolutely new to all the fans if you have been following along for the last 34 years. So I think you just made a very good point about, okay, now we're going into this new phase that it opens with the intro, but also besides the new music, I think it adds that visual aspect that we were not used to it before. And I think it enhances the song a lot and it adds a different flavor to maybe certain songs that they needed a little bit of refresh or something extra to be played live.
We'll get into that when we start to break down the songs, how they related to the crowd and how they were starting to find out what the crowd was doing to react to them. And I think a lot of it comes from the band too. If the band feels it, then they know that there's a good chance the crowd's going to feel it. But also, if the crowd feels it and the band also feels it, like they're going to keep reacting to that and they're going to keep going with something. So a lot of what they do has always been reactional. If there's a song that they like per se that the crowd doesn't necessarily react to as much. This has happened with new songs all the time. They'll drop it and they'll bring it back instead of every show, every 2 shows maybe. There's been songs like that in the past. And I feel like there are a couple that ended up that way from Dark Matter that we can get into at this show. But it's so hard. It is so hard when you're a legacy band on your 12th record to put these songs out there when you're doing not a significant less amount of songs, but compared to what you're used to, yeah, you're losing about like 4 to 6 songs in a set on average. Add all the numbers together. Say this was the Lightning Bolt tour. You were getting like 32 songs on average. And if you were getting 8 Lightning Bolt songs out of 32, then you were getting 24 songs of everything else. There are 26 songs in this set. And you get, again, 8 Dark Matter songs. So that's now gone down to 18 of everything else. Now, you mix around, and this show is a little bit different because you do get songs like Hard to Imagine and Tremor Christ and Inside Job and Breath, stuff that you usually don't get. Sometimes add that in there. Breakerfall, add that in there. It's a pretty good deep cut show for sure. And say it's a different show from this tour where you are going more towards Even Flows, Jeremy's, Black, Corduroy, Better Man. Those all add up to where after a while you don't have a lot of room for everything else to get spliced in. This one, I think, stands out to people because they made a cognizant effort to make that room for these songs. There's another great discussion to be had about the what's versus the hows and the whys for this show, for sure, because this is definitely on paper a what show. A show that if you're not there, you gravitate towards wanting to listen to this bootleg first before maybe a different show that has more of the intangible factors that you can't see from set lists.
If you have been following the band for the first couple of shows on this tour too, maybe the reason why this got so much buzz is because it felt like the first show within the new shows that it had something different to offer when it comes to a structure. Because one of the conversations that we had at the beginning, it was also like, are we getting some sort of a structure because of the visuals? Are we getting some sort of a structure in set design because now we're going to go through sections? But this, if you compare it to everything else that it was around that time, it feels that it was a little different in the way that the sets were built compared to the other shows. And I think that adds to the freshness and that adds to the hype that show has gotten over fans over time too.
Oh yeah, absolutely, for sure. For sure that's the case. And I think there is a little bit of something to be said for why this show does have everything. Now, you had Sacramento that was a couple nights before this, and Sacramento is a makeup show. That's back from 2022 where they had to cancel the last 2 dates, which happened to be both Sacramento and Vegas. And Sacramento was following what was a very memorable Fresno show with Dave Cruzen following along. And depending on who you ask, a lot of people thought that Dave Cruzen was supposed to be at that Sacramento show too before everything kind of changed that. So what you get with Vegas, more so than Sacramento, I think you got a little bit of the gems in Sacramento as well, but Sacramento, it was still very early, so they still wanted to feel stuff out. And remember, like they're older now, so a lot of these songs, like Tremor Christ and Hail Hail, like they're not gonna play a whole lot. So it's muscle memory that they have to go back to, and it takes them a lot longer to mentally put that together rather than it would a decade ago. That's just the case, and people kind of forget about that sometimes, but that's just sort of what we deal with here. And that's okay. We want this band to survive for as long as they can, and if that's the way they got to do it, that's the way they got to do it. But Vegas was supposed to be the most looked forward to show back on that leg in 2022 for a few different reasons, because they hadn't been back to Vegas since 2006. It had been a pretty long time that you're not back to one of the hot travel destination points. And because it was a hot travel destination point on I believe this was supposed to happen on a Friday night. Yes, this was supposed to be a Friday night show. So think about Vegas on a Friday night. You're going to get a lot of people that are going to attend this from near and from far. And say that everything went okay for Sacramento, Cameron was supposed to return at the Vegas show, that they were aiming for this to be his comeback show. So this was planning to be big, almost no matter how you slice it. It was the last show of the first official leg of Gigaton Tour, so you had a little bit of that too, and kind of a celebration of some point, and they never got a chance to do any of that. So when they travel here, you get the 5th show of the tour, they come here. A lot of that is on the table, and a lot of that is probably in Ed's head as he's making the set list at 4 in the morning, as he would say. So that's why I think a lot of people wanted to come to the show and the other one in the first place. But that's also why you get what you get here.
I wonder if he was so anxious just to go out and play and he just needed to sit down or grab a piece of paper and start to write the set, that he couldn't wait till the afternoon before, like, as we know, that it's a little bit more traditional for them. But I wonder what he got into his mind that it's just like, I just need to write the set right now, because he's pretty explicit about that. This is one of those late night sets. I wonder how many late night sets we have had in this tour besides Vegas 1.
I don't know. I'm going to guess he was up late thinking about that Sydney set too. That's my guess. I mean, what time would he have had to been awake and writing a set list for the Ohana stuff for Grammy and Whale Song to pop up, you know?
True.
But it works, and it was definitely a thank you to the people that had waited for 2 years that really wanted to see Pearl Jam. And what was, as Ed would say, the smallest arenas that they were playing on that leg for sure. All right, I think we can dig into the set list now, and I kind of ran down a lot of the songs that are going to be there, so you're going to hear what they're all about and what we're doing with them now. So, first of all, if you have not checked this out, there are a lot of great concert videos on YouTube, full shows that are terrific quality, that have an audience perspective as if you were in like the 3rd or 4th row in the GA. And you're able to kind of see this show from that perspective of being a fan right up front and personal. So this is definitely worth your while if you want to go and check this out on YouTube. I will pause the podcast right now if you want to go check out a couple of songs, and we'll wait for you. We'll be right here. Hey, welcome back. Thank you all for going to check that out. And now we are ready to get into our show. So band takes the stage. They do the whole intro thing and the curtain and everything like that. And then we are going to start with a song that I got some numbers on, because it's one of those songs where you think in your brain, it always comes back. It's like, okay, this is a typical opener for this band. This band will use this as an opener song more often than not. The song is Sometimes.
Fingers pushing pain. Yeah, you're God and you got big hands. The colors blend. The challenges you give in.
So, I'm going to piggyback off those numbers. Sometimes it's been played 18 times since 2012. So that's 12 years. 18 times. It's not a lot, but for this song, not a common song. So you get it. Only 4 of those 18 times have been as the opener, which is a downward trend that I'm sure many of you, including myself, didn't realize. The last time that they had opened with it happened to be in 2018 at Fenway, so it had been 6 years since they had done it in that point. And think about all of the times that they played it during the Lightning Bolt tour. I saw it a couple times on the Lightning Bolt tour. They're opening with Pendulum. They're not opening with Sometimes, and that happens for at least a couple of years. So you don't get those opportunities. I get that. Some other songs will get the luxury of having that, like a Release or a Wash or Long Road or something like that, but sometimes doesn't get that luxury. But overall, whether you know it or not, it's ingrained into your mind that Sometimes means something different can kind of come out of the show. And then when time comes for Hard to Imagine, and that's your top two, I think that automatically puts into your head, okay, this is why I'm going to gravitate towards this show, because already they're telling me that this is going to be a little bit different.
Agreed. And sometimes for me, whenever it shows up as an opener, which I'm kind of surprised that those numbers are not higher, because this is a song that you will immediately relate to, like, okay, this is going to be an opener for them in a maybe more common basis. But whenever you get it on a live show, it adds that layer of uncertainty and maybe mystery. I don't know why that song makes me feel that way, but then when you follow up with Hard to Imagine and then even Black, you're like, all right, I need to listen to this bootleg anytime soon, because that is a combo that you're not going to see very often, especially in the last couple tours.
This feels like a cognizant decision to say, hey, how do we kind of perk some ears up? How do we start this show and tell the people that it's not going to be like maybe you think most Pearl Jam shows are? It's not going to be like the first four that we put out. We're doing something very specific and something special for you. Hard to Imagine thrown in there. I think that always gets a lot of heads. Everybody starts to talk about it. And you mention it, the first three, and really Hail Hail too, because when you come out of Black, your instant thought is they can go into Given a Fly, they can go into Why Go. Those were two of the more popular songs that were used in that spot after the opening sequence. And Hail Hail only got played like 4 times this year. So again, you're putting more emphasis on the surprise element. Now, I did want to talk to you about Hard to Imagine here, because we've seen this before, that the end of the song has now a 4-guitar attack when you add in Josh and Ed straps in at the end too. What does the 4-guitar attack do for a song like Hard to Imagine?
Man, so much, because the original structure is a Stone and Mike just getting into the lick of din 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 din, but now you have that bed of rhythm guitars that is done by Ed and Josh. And I want to say this in a very good way. Josh is kind of a sloppy player, but his style of playing rhythm guitars, he just like makes the guitar ring so well within the sloppiness. In the way that he kind of drags the chords a little bit better, it makes the song sounds a little bigger than what it really is. You can have a little piece of each element that you need the song to make it more emotional too, because if you will have only Stone and Mike doing the only part, and then Ed sometimes gets a little lost in the mix in the back, and it's not fair for Ed, but now having Josh adding more layers to it, it really makes the song like that momentum going forward, especially at the end. It makes it wrap it up like in a way that it deserves.
Speaking of emotional aspect, we get Black number 3, as mentioned. And this is not like the rarest thing in the world anymore for Black to be very early in the set. This is something that kind of came into fruition back in 2014, where they played it a little bit towards the top. And then once they started to do that sit down section in 2022, it creeped back into one of those spots then as well. And then, as we know, a week or so later, it would be the opener for the first time since 1991. But all that being said, it's always one of these things when you get Black very, very early on like this, your crowd has that awe-inspiring response, like this buzz that happens in the arena where the crowd is like, okay, bring it on. We didn't expect this at all. Now we're about to sing. Now we're about to go off. The way that the song kind of develops is that it creeps into Mike finding his moment and letting everything out of his system. It starts off very relaxed, and then once Ed holds out that all I'll be for the eternity that he always holds it out for, you can hear Matt start to pick it up a little bit, and then Mike is able to take this home in a way that, yeah, he knows how to do best. Talking to Steve about this version specifically when it came out, and he's like, this is going to be the best Black on the tour. And I'm like, man, that's saying a lot, because this song can really have there's no drop-off point. It just keeps getting better and better and better. And I think the last Black of the Year in Cindy is definitely the best, but boy, this is up there. This certainly deserves part of the conversation.
I was going to say, Steve, that was a pretty bold statement, but I mean, it's up there for sure, but probably our Australian friends are pretty mad listening to this right now, because that's Sydney from Black.
He also said that, I think, like a couple days after the show, so...
Okay. Steve, you're forgiven. You're forgiven, Steve. And I think this is a conversation that we have had with friends in the past as well. It's just, I think Black fits the purpose better in that 3rd to 4th spot, because you can kind of let go of Mike a little bit more and you can really see it. I feel that as an opener, sometimes it's kind of like you got to restrain Mike a little bit just not to make it very long, but all the elements were right on spot for this version. It's a very, very good one.
All right, so Ed gives Mike a shout out after that, of course, and then he asks to see people in all different sections of the arena, toast them all, and ask who came from near and far to join us in the desert. Says this is the smallest venue on tour, shiny outside but cozy inside, and then shouts out his sound guy Nelly and asks him if he has the radio turned up all the way and plays it up to the crowd. He did this a lot this tour. Are you ready? No, I said, are you ready? Like, he doesn't have to do that, but okay. I see where you're coming from. That's fine. And that will take us into the aforementioned Hail Hail, and then your beginning of the Dark Matter section in Scared of Fear and React Respond. So Hail Hail, I'll go back to the version I saw at MSG, and even going back to the Toronto version from a couple years ago, because I guess intrinsically you're not thinking about this song popping up in a set, that when hearing those first chords, the reaction to it, the excitement is just almost unbearable, because it's a song that can get you to that excitement level, but also because you add in the surprise element in your mind. Again, you don't know that it's coming. There's just another added element of total elation on this. And I think Hail Hail is one of those weird, rare songs that has that. Like, I think Hail Hail and Save You is on the same level when it comes to early set songs like that, because think about Corduroy, Given a Fly, Why Go? You expect those, and you're happy to have those, of course. But Hail Hail, there's just an energy in the room when you hear that. And I feel like everybody is like, okay, you're showing us what you got. We see you. Keep dealing.
And it takes you away from that Black at the end trance that you get into it with all the stuff that people like collaborate with the band in a version like this too. But it's a really good spot for the song. You were mentioning Why Go, Given to Fly. I will add to this Brain of J too. I think it works perfectly fine for that spot.
And another huge surprise, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, maybe if you guys are nice enough, that'll be our episode that we cover in a couple weeks. Just hint, hint. It better be. But when you leave things up to the audience, it can get a little bit scary. But yeah, this version of Hell Hail is very good. Jeff sounds great. And now you're diving into the dark matter material. The video screen starts up. It's that kind of sun that's about to rise. And you get kicked off. Scared of Fear, as I was mentioning before, almost was falling out of favor a little bit as the tour went along. It was 10 out of 11 times in May, 5 out of the 6 in Europe, and then only 6 out of 13 shows on leg 2 of the US, and then 3 out of the 7 on the remaining legs. I am curious as to what the future is for this one, because, again, what I'd really like to see out of this is I want the intro gone. Because I think the intro, because maybe some of the unpredictability factor goes away when you hear that. It's like, oh, all right, we know what's happening now. All right, let's brace ourselves. And the riff can be so much more if it was just like, Hail, Hail ends, we clap. I think that can get so many people more excited to get the song and to hear the song that the intro just kind of hovers over it and almost kind of falls flat after a while. I think maybe they should toy with using Scared of Fear in the later part of the set and getting rid of the intro altogether. Because it's one of those things where they never played it without that intro, I don't think. Anytime that they played it live, it was always the first Dark Matter song. And I think maybe to change it up a little bit, to make the song feel less stale, try it somewhere else and get rid of the intro.
They'll figure it out a way. This is a very good song, and I don't think it should be lost in time for the rest of the sets of whatever we have in the next couple of years, but hopefully they find a way that they feel more comfortable with it without the intro. I totally agree with you. For me, when I look at the set, I would love to see Scare of Fear maybe way down in the encore, maybe after the acoustic track Ed is going to play, or maybe after something a little slower, but I have hope that they're going to find the right spot for the song again, because I was also surprised that it started kind of to fade away out of the last sets, which is one of my live favorites too from this new album. And like, that riff is so catchy. Like, I really hope that they find a way just to not to get it lost in time.
I think the differences between both Scared of Fear and React Respond is that React Respond is a very direct song and it is straight up what it is. And I know that kind of sounds like, okay, well, I don't really get much out of that statement, but it's a fast rocker. It doesn't have a lot of different breakdown pieces. Scared of Fear goes from really upbeat to taking almost a turn in the same way that Whoever Said does, but I think Whoever Said is able to almost pick itself back up. And I'm not saying that Scared of Fear can't, but that little section where they build back up, I think might take a crowd out of it if it's a new song that they're just still getting acclimated towards. React Respond doesn't need a lot of acclimation as much as maybe Scared of Fear does, because it's just straight through. Big mic rocker at the end, big solo. It's just electric, and I think that when it comes to the newer stuff, you don't want to beat around the bush with some of these songs. You give them the songs that are just going to work straight up. And that's why I think maybe React Respond got a little bit more play when it came to breaking stuff down later than Scared of Fear.
I think React Respond also is a really good transition song where you really want to pace up your set. For example, I can see the band trying something like Hail Hail Why Go React Respond very quickly. They were trending in the last couple of sets, so that they were kind of getting back to that old Pearl Jam from 2011, 2012, that it was one, two slow ones, and they were going to destroy your face with 4 hits kind of stuff. But I think that might be one of the reasons too, now that you're mentioning that, because the Scare of Fear, it has more pauses, it has a little bit more structure more guitar effects, and maybe that's not what they needed right now to establish their set and to build up their set, especially for the Aussie audiences. And React Respawn is going to allow you that. And also, like, that bass line from Jeff and React Respawn is just like too tasty. So you need to play it more often too.
Right. Yeah, there are elements in that you can hear in the crowd and be like, ooh, okay, gravitate towards. And Scared of Fear, I think, is just like, all right, we're getting a pretty good song with a lot of pieces in it. React Respawn definitely works here. And, of course, on to the next, right? It's Wreckage. The 37 for 37 perfect score of the year, up there with Alive. And this specific version was actually chosen as the music video. And also, this past weekend, we had Record Store Day. It was the B-side on the Record Store Day release to the Waiting for Stevie single that they put out from Seattle Night 2. So this was a version they obviously thought pretty highly of. And I think it does sound a little bit different in terms of what they were doing when the tour kind of moved along. And you have a couple of points as to maybe why, but I kind of heard, and I know it's not a wah pedal, it's not a wah sound, but maybe a little bit more of a twang sound. But usually that progressive riff that Stone is doing is a little bit more opened up and a little bit more crisp. But this kind of sounded almost like he was doing some hammer-ons in it instead of like a full pluck.
Throwing, drowning all our yesterdays. Visited by thoughts on another darkened week. How even every win I hit or losing streak. The mistakes we all make and perfectly repeat. Strains I made, but DNA refusing to relate.
So why is that the case? Why maybe does Wreckage sound a little bit different in its progression here?
You made the perfect explanation for that, because that's what it is. So when the guys were trying the new songs, you're also trying to figure out the instruments that you need for the song, like what kind of guitar, what kind of bass is going to serve the sound that you need. So for Wreckage specifically, they both try to get single coil guitars to start the tour with. Specifically, Mike went with the Jason Isbell Telecaster, and then Stone was using an old Strat that he owns. But that kind of like hammer-on is coming from the Strat, and Stone being very crafty with his right hand, so he's using plugging or maybe like doing hammer-ons with his own hand. Like, you never know. He will change the version according to the night. But later on, Stone move on to the Gibson Les Paul Classic, Special Classic, the instrument that he's obsessed with. Wherever he goes, he will try to find one. I think he owns 5 right now, if I'm correct. And Mike moved on towards a 1952 Telecaster that he has been playing for a very, very long time. And I think the guitar that Stone is using right now, it adds more clarity, because ironically, this guitar was a huge failure, the one that Stone is so obsessed with it in the 60s and the 70s, because people will tell you that you cannot push it very hard or it will sound too clear, which right now, it perfectly makes sense, because the arrangements that he will be playing over the song, they're so unique and they're so beautiful that you need the more clarity as possible. So the biggest failure at that time, it was the biggest strike for Stone right now.
Funny how that all works out in the end, right?
Absolutely. And actually, I had a very interesting conversation with Richard Fortas from Guns N' Roses about this. And our theory was the fact that the guitar didn't got enough attention because no Guitar Hero used it at that time. And actually, right now, it's a very sought after instrument because of the qualities that it possesses.
That is all fascinating stuff that I didn't know beforehand. So thank you for
now
that.
Well, now you know. See, that's how I waste my time, researching that kind of crap.
Waste. I call it a waste. Hey, it's being put towards decent use.
Acquire knowledge and wisdom over time, I guess.
Well, Ed shouts out Brett changing the mics. I don't know if Brett Eliason is changing the mics, but somebody named Brett is changing the mics and says he'll introduce all of the crew guys out tonight. I think that's the last time he introduced anybody from the crew. So
I don't think he did at all.
promises, right? Daughter, Dark Matter, and I'll throw in a little bit of wish list after that as well. The theme for Daughter this year, until it turned into It's Okay, that took the spotlight in Australia, was pretty much the Another Brick in the Wall tag. You were going to get that almost every night. And it didn't talk a whole lot, considering that he could have, and considering what he's done in the past. He didn't do a whole lot of political talk at these shows. And yes, he did at points. I'm looking at Ohana. That's probably one of the biggest points where he did. But a lot of, if he had to say something, ended up happening in this Another Brick in the Wall tag, where he would change it to politician, leave these women's bodies alone, and has a great response as you expect. But that's kind of at baseline. That was his way of getting what he needed to say out there. It was very light on that for this tour. In some aspects, like, that's good. In some aspects, it's like, hey, Ed, there are some people that want to hear what you have to say. And I get that there are people that don't want to hear what he has to say because they're at a Pearl Jam show and they want to hear music. I get that, but it's okay for him to say that, as he has for 34 years. But again, it might be a maturing factor too, where he's thinking to himself, maybe this isn't the time and the place anymore. I don't know. But think about if this were 10 years ago and the election results happened to be the election results, it could have been pretty bad. And he kept it very level-headed, which I very much applaud. That's not easy to do. And then Dark Matter following up afterwards. I think Dark Matter, they should have found a way to open up with this more, to use this as the opener or the second song. They did once at a festival show, and I believe it was the Lisbon show. They went from Daughter into Dark Matter, as a matter of fact, as the first two, but missed opportunity to not put this in the beginning of the set to get you ready, because it felt like they had a little bit of time in the beginning of this tour where they were hoping they would come out of it right away and get that response that the song was really meant to have. And I think it would definitely come later, but so far they're playing up to it, but it doesn't quite happen just yet on the first couple shows of this tour. And I think when you listen to it more and more as time goes on, I think it's almost impossible not to react with it and sing along to it, but I don't think the crowd is there just yet with it.
I agree. Dark Matter for me is a song that in this phase of the first leg is not ready for me yet. I think we can find better versions, but would you imagine just like getting into the stage and, you know, like just getting the extended intro with the drums and just kick off with that?
Yeah, I do.
I know.
Actually, a decent amount.
Too many times. Well, if we get any dates next year, why not? You know?
Yeah, I think they're ready to play around. I would hope that they're ready to play around with this stuff, to be like, okay, we don't need to section things. And they kind of, again, as the end of the year came along, they got away from that a little bit more. But I think now Dark Matter and Wreckage and a couple of these other songs they're able to fly on their own. Let them fly. You did it for other albums, and those songs were able to fly. These songs are given to fly. Maybe they're not, but you know what I mean. Dark Matter can be the one that introduces you into the set and gets you excited, and I hope to see that as things continue to happen. Before we get into wish list, Ed talks about Andrew Watt getting the best of the group and working them like slaves. This is the first night of the tour that he is there, and wish list is dedicated to all the dreamers. The visuals in wish list harken back to the mirror ball look that they've been doing since day one on this song, getting the mirror ball down there and flashing all the lights, which is very, very cool. But there is an improv at the end. Ed starts to use his ebo, but he just gives this look like, no, No, just throws it away. Like for maybe a measure or two, he plays that he's like, this ain't it. I'm not feeling it. So his improv lyrics here are Vegas can make you feel like a lucky man. Vegas can take everything you have.
I'm only betting on what's important to me. My one true love and my family. I don't need Vegas to feel lucky. Besides, I lost $500 playing blackjack, and I said I'm fucking out of here.
He'll also kind of tease things. I don't know if this is a tease for people that might be thinking, oh, will they ever play the spear? But he says, now I'll come back tomorrow here, maybe better yet, next year in between the shows, the Dead Blade at the Spear. I know a lot of people that went to both Vegas shows and the Spear show, so they're probably thinking to themselves, like, Pearl Jam can do this. This will be really exciting. And I don't know, I'm going to leave that for another conversation on this, maybe someday. Not saying never, because never can say never, but I don't think they want to charge the $400 a ticket. Just throwing that out there. Ed says, I see some good requests out there. Just want to let you know that the set list was not made earlier in the day, nor was made yesterday. It was made at 4 a.m. It was one of those after midnight set lists. I hope that you like it. And I think that it's a good indication where Breakerfall happens middle of the set list. Something funky is going on in your brain, and you're like, yeah, okay, let's try it. Why the fuck not? Breakerfall running an even flow in this section here. It's a fun version of Breakerfall that I think almost changes the tone for the rest of the main set. You had your first part, you just got out of your first Dark Matter stuff, and now you think, okay, even flow is coming, but before you get to that moment, you're going to give them a nice little check mark to get this song. Because this ain't a song we're going to see too often moving forward over the years, unless they find a good groove with it. But I thought that this was a lot of fun. I think they're putting up a good momentum with these three songs. Running is a really, really good follow-up to that, and that keeps the momentum together. And then Even Flow is going to be the right hand that comes in and hits you in the face. So what do you think about this section here?
I like it. It feels kind of like an interlude. Maybe Ed needed to go to the bathroom at 4 a.m. or something when he was writing this set. But it feels like there is a little bit of a break in between whatever he was going through while he was writing the set. But personal opinion, I just think a Breakerfall half step down doesn't work for me. But I just think that the section itself, when you look at it as a whole, it works. Breakerfall running even flow, you get like really good momentum going forward before you get to the other element, which is going to be the next song, because the next song, it takes you somewhere else. Because that's one of the ones that I think has grown a lot since we heard it on the show.
I don't have too much else to say about Running or Even Flow here, so why don't we just tap right into that upper hand and Waiting for Stevie in the next section. I'm surprised that you want to talk about upper hand so much, because that song gave you a little bit of a hard time this year, right? Like you were almost about to swear it off at one point, I remember.
It is a love-hate relationship. We went through the hate. Now we're in the love section right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, it gave me a hard time when I was making the Gear Garage episode. But if I go back to this set and if I can listen to Upper Hand one more time, I think for me is when Upper Hand has started to become the song that it means for me now. It's just, I think now in this version specifically for this show, I can hear the stuff that I like so much that maybe was not in previous versions.
So what are you referring to there when you say that?
I think the band found the right pace. Everybody found their own room in within the song, because the first couple of versions I heard that it was a little messy, that there was too much going on, because it has so many different elements. You have the intro, you have what Josh is doing in the back, Boom, Ed, Mike, everybody's doing something very, very complex just to make it work. But this version for me feels tight. It feels like everybody's locked in. And all the songs within the songs are working. So I think that's the biggest reason why I like this version so much.
This is a song that I hope sticks around enough where people can gravitate towards it more. And I know that Stevie, when you hear these two back to back, Stevie's going to be a one for a lot of people, and there's an obvious reason why, but I'm going to get into maybe something that isn't so obvious. But I would like to see them evolve with this song a little bit more. What else can we do with it? How can we make this something that the crowd can grasp onto even more? Let's see if 2025 has that. Before waiting for Stevie, he kind of jokes around a little bit and says Stevie's about Stevie Wonder, Stevie Nicks, Steve Gleason, Stevie Ray Vaughan, but actually it's about the power of music. And I think what makes Stevie so good that everybody gravitates towards is very obvious. It's the solo, it's the ending, it's Mike having one of his best moments in the last 15 or 20 years of Pearl Jam. That's an accurate statement. I'm not going to argue that a whole lot. That's one of his best moments since like Riot Act. However, I think what makes this song so good leading up to that moment, building up to that moment, is that the song has such great pop rock sensibilities. And it's so approachable. It's easy to sing. It's resilient. There are no verses in it, so there's no what I like to call chuffa. That's a term for if you're going through a movie script, basically all the bullshit, like you walk into a room and you're like, oh, hey, haven't been here for a while. Like, it doesn't push the story forward. It's just something to say before getting into the good stuff. It doesn't have the chuffa. It gets right into the choruses, and the choruses make it stand out. It simplifies things because it's chorus, post-chorus, or bridge, whatever you want to call that. And it does that for a couple of measures until the big ending. And I think the simplicity and the easiness of the song's identity gives it a resilient moment at the end. I don't think that should go unnoticed either, because that's not a technique that Pearl Jam really comes up with too often. They're usually a lot more intricate. I think we had talked about on Gigaton how it was a very wordy album, and maybe this was one of those cognizant efforts to be a little bit less wordy and give you the same kind of storytelling with less time. This is a really good example of that. You can be very simplistic in a song while still blowing somebody away, and Waiting for Stevie makes that all look really good.
I think you have described the song in the most perfect way ever.
Thanks.
Seriously. No, seriously. That's exactly what it is. And if there's one thing that for me stands out besides everything else you said, it's like the intro riff is so freaking hypnotic. Like, you're going to get attached to it right away. Like, everything else you said is just, yeah, it's perfect.
I wasn't attempting to be perfect. I was just attempting to bring in a different perspective on it, because everybody just goes straight to the solo with this. And if you're just focusing on a solo, you're missing aspects of songs that make songs, because it does have those fun pop rock kind of moments. All right, Ed says one of our favorite memories of being in this building was our 10th anniversary. We had this big party and rented Liberace's house, and seemed like it was the most ridiculous thing that you can do. And then Stone hired some showgirls to make it even more ridiculous, and they were some of the most gorgeous men that he's ever seen. They were packing a punch. Now, when we turn 30 years old, I feel about the same age as our band. I think we basically just texted each other and was like, hey man, 30 years. How you feeling? Feeling good? Yeah, man, I'm good. We keep doing it? Yeah, all right. So here we are, still doing it. And that's because you're still here and you're pushing us along the way. So big thank you to you. As we get into the end of the set, we are going to go from Tremor Christ, and then we'll get into a little bit of something before getting to the Lucan Porch. Tremor Christ's history in Las Vegas is very important. This is where the song made its live debut back in 1993 at a very famous show, Aladdin Theater. We've covered that before on the podcast. You guys have probably listened to that before. It is well worth your time. Green River reunion, on and on and on. Great performances all over the place. And it's just more surprises to fuel the setlist chaser on this. A few instances where the song was played this year, like once on every run, except for Europe, including the last show of the tour where Vitalogy is celebrating the birthday. So Tremor Christ, which always feels like a song that's like, holy shit, like I can't believe they're actually playing it, because in most cases they probably wouldn't. It kind of reared its head a little bit more often this year than it usually does.
I'm always going to take Tremor Christ anytime. It's always a very fun surprise. There's something so dark about the song that I really intrigued to it, but every single time that I get it on a set, I'm just like, yes. And I think we got it in Chicago, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, yes. Okay, good.
Every time the song gets played, there's a litany of people that are like, I thought I would never hear it. So, yeah, it's always a very, very good moment. Now, let's get into this, because we'll have a story to tell in just a second, but let's tee it all up. I'm not one to be out gambling, but here's what we're going to do. We're going to trust each other. And he goes and moseys over to the front, and standing there are two people that I got to know pretty well during this tour, especially in Philly, Jaco and Aaron. And Jaco is, like, you can tell when he's out of Pearl Jam, he's very, very tall. He's got a massive beard. Ed goes right up to him, and he's about to give him the cash and ask him, who do you think the better gambler is? And he points over to his partner, Aaron, and he's like, oh, good man. Like, you know, when you see an honest woman. And he says, all right, here's what you can do. See if you can double it. If you lose it all, it was part of the experiment. And if you win any of it, then we split it. He mentions the honest woman part, and he says, you know what? She's bringing the honest man out of me. Stone, I actually took that money out of your backpack. So, good on you for keeping your kleptomaniac ways, Ed. Never change. So, since I got to know them, I was more than happy to ask them, hey, how did this all go about? And we know what the end result was from the night 2 show, but let's hear from Erin to hear her side of the story on this. If I can recall correctly, and if my memory is clear on this at all, or if it was just some random dreamlike situation that I experienced, which I will say completely detached me from all my sense of reality in that moment. I put 5 $100 bills in my back pocket. Ed walks back to the mic stand. The band shreds Lucan. Unreal experience. I was floating. So now here we are. I leave the show. I have Eddie's money. People start to buzz. We look at it. We're all pumped. And as a gal with a bit more than a touch of anxiety at the best of times, this kind of starts to feel like a lot of pressure. Don't get me wrong, it's complete excitement and a feeling of sheer luck and privilege to be the one chosen to do this fun experiment, but also total pressure not to F this up, go back to the show with empty hands. And there's a lot of flowing ideas of what I should do. Everyone around me is excited, all my friends, and I will note that most everyone I consult claims to be a top-notch gambler or pretty darn good. And there's no shortage of the amount of pro tips I should take to try and get a good return on Ed's cash. But again, there was a feeling of pressure wanting to go into night 2 and have this big elaborate outcome in the gambling experiment. So I take the cash and I start to think. To be honest, I am frugal and I don't really gamble. My spouse is correct that I am the money person in our house, but more so the fact that I'm calculated about the ways that I deal with the money, and I make sure to budget, save, plan so we can afford to travel and see the world a little, to catch some shows and be with our friends, just to be in a position to experience some of what's so important to us while we're still here. Tossing money onto a table is not usually part of it, but I'm feeling very lucky in this moment, and I'm not afraid of a challenge. I absorb the feedback, the tips and tricks of my expert gambling friends. I bring some of them along with me the next day to try and fucking double it as requested. I'm doing pretty good. Spread it around to a few different games. I pump a little bit into some slot machines, some roulette. I go down, then I get ahead a little bit, but I'm just not hitting on any big returns. Not with my slow and steady methods. I watch friends slam some money on fast bets of their own and walk away with cash, but I'm afraid to lose Ed's money. Time is ticking away, but I need to go off on my own. The night carries on, and so do I. I finally get a good handle on roulette. I had sat myself down at a little casino off the beaten path, and a super nice lady befriends me who has stacks of chips with her. She tells me that she has a technique, and it is a good one. So I start to adopt a similar strategy, and my stack of winnings begins to grow. But it is a slow and steady strategy, and I'm running out of time. I've gotten myself reasonably ahead, but not in the way that I would have hoped. I lose complete track of time. It is now the next day. It is literally the crack of dawn, and I have not yet even seen a pillow. I'm wearing the same clothes, and I know in this moment I have to get back to the venue so I can get a good spot for the Night 2 show. I can't be at the back of the pit when Ed questions me, and I know he's going to. The day goes on. I have some winnings, but not enough to impress. The show is in a couple hours. So I take the money I have left. I need a bathroom break from the queue, so I run into the MGM and I decide there's no time left. On my way back, I have to take a risk. I need to do just a couple of hefty bets and see if I can hit it. 10 black, 33 black, 23 red. Things like that. But it does not work. I have lost Eddie's money. Time still ticks on. I start to think. I also knew from the start that I really didn't need any money to make these experiences better. I just now needed to show that to Ed and the band somehow. People are starting to ask what happened with the money. I tell people that it is gone, and I invite those willing if they would take part in giving back to Ed and to EB, the foundation that is near and dear to the vetters. I explain that I would still like to try and double it and give the money not back to Ed, but to EB, if there is time. So many of the people that I talk to are on board. The generosity of the Pearl Jam community is in full force. Money flows my way and I start to build the funds back up. Dollar by dollar, I stuff it into an envelope from the sheer generosity of friends and fans alike. I write Ed a short note. I try to explain what happened as best as I can in the short space on the back of the envelope. I don't know when he's going to ask, but I know that he will. When we're at the show in the pit, money still floats to the front. I add it to the stack. It feels like so much love. I am in awe of the people around me. Friends have rallied and made EB signs to display for the moment when Ed asked me about the return on investment. It happens. Ed starts to recall back to the crowd. He mentions giving the money to a nice young couple during the previous show. He is asking where we are and if there's any return on investment. I glance over at Stone, and he mouths to me, "Did you win?" I shake my head, no. I had lost. He smiles. Ed now sees me and sees the sign that starts to pop up, the EB signs, and I am holding the envelope for him to see. A confused look passes his face. He walks to me. I hand it over. Ed goes back to his mic and says, "I'm not sure what's happening here," and then he reads my letter aloud. "Ed, I stayed up all night, but in the end, the casino had the upper hand. I already feel I won the lottery just through these experiences, and so some friends and I decided to go all in for EB. Aaron." I absolutely had not doubled it as he had asked me, but as a group of kind hearts, we had effectively tripled the money in less than an hour through the generosity of the community in a cashless society. It was incredibly touching to Ed and really to all of us. Tears in Ed's eyes, and in all of our eyes. Tears in Jill's eyes as she made her way to the front of the pit to be with fans. Vegas and all, we don't need any winnings. We have all won. What a tremendous story, and a once in a lifetime experience that Ed is just going to take a sweaty couple $100 bills and give them to a random fan in the crowd. And yeah, think about it. There is pressure on that. You want to make a good story out of this. You want to impress Ed, especially Aaron and Jocko go to all these shows. So he's going to be seeing them a lot throughout the year. And in his mind, now that he sees them all the time, he can kind of smile and be like, hey, she's the one that we gave the money to. And she did a super amazing thing with it. So I thank Aaron for sharing the story. This is truly incredible, and I'm so glad that you guys got to hear it because it should be one that's shared throughout the community. We knew the end result, but it's the journey. The way that she got there was just, yeah, that's a pretty legendary story. So thank you so much. And yeah, that's worth the price of admission right there. So Lucan in the Porch is going to end your main set here. And look, Porch in the last couple decades, it's been known as this song where it's going to close the main set or close an encore, and Ed's going to go down to the floor and he's going to have a moment at the barricade and maybe even times like actually get on top of the crowd and have somebody sing. And because they're so far apart, he doesn't really have the opportunity to do that anymore. The distance from rail to stage is just enough to where Mike can walk down a little bit, but like even so, not enough room for him to walk the whole perimeter and actually like show off a little bit. Enough people can get in there and tap him on the shoulder or something like that, but it doesn't really happen. I don't know if there's a loss of connection per se, but you do miss a little bit of something when Ed's not really on top of this crowd. And he does get there. He does give them the mic at one point. But, I mean, those versions from the Lightning Bolt tour where he's on the barricade and he's basically on top of people as they're singing with him and on top of him, that's what you take out of Porch from those. That and the orbs being broken around. But you know what I mean? It takes away a moment that was so unique to Pearl Jam that it doesn't feel like they really quite have that magic within Porch anymore.
I miss those moments too. Something that reminds me of that as well is Jeremy. Jeremy, in that tour, we had a lot of those moments where he will get to the crowd and you will sing with him in the crowd, but maybe in a bigger stadium setting, he's going to have that opportunity again. But you have one of those things that you're going to remember when that Porch moment happens and you see like it singing on top of the crowd. So yeah, I also miss that.
Well, that is our main set. So now we're at the encore. Let's pause for station identification here and talk about a couple of things. Before getting into any Patreon things, I just want to throw this in at the top. Remember that the date of the Live on Four Legs holiday party will be December 19th, and that will be over Zoom. And we'll have a lot of fun with that. I think we will be going over the best of the year moments where we will turn that conversation into an episode of the podcast that will air right on, I think, New Year's Day is where I'm slating that for. So it'll be a little bit different this year. I think a lot of you know of that moment to be like the Hall of Fame episode week. And we're going to blend both of those together because I got a message the other day saying like, oh, hey, I can't wait to hear the podcast episode on the best of the year. And I'm like, podcast episode? So we'll actually do something with it this year. And I think a lot of what we'll do is we'll get the reactions and we'll talk about the shows with you guys at the holiday party. We'll do a little bit of that. We'll probably show some documentary footage and maybe we'll play some games and stuff like that. So it'll be really easy going. It'll be a lot of fun. I know a lot of people that are within this community that come every single year that love to get to see everybody and talk to everybody. But if you haven't been involved, that's a really good time to get to join in and get to know people and get to talk to people that maybe you haven't talked to before that are within the community. So we're all going to be there and we're excited for new people, old people to all jump right in. And it's been a couple of months, so hopefully we get to see everybody again and get to catch up. So that will be on Zoom, and the Zoom information will come when it comes time to get closer to the date. As for Patreon, you can subscribe to Patreon whenever you'd like. Now is a good time because it is always a good time, but also I think we're getting very, very close to Dark Matter Deconstruction Part 3. Am I right? I heard a little clip this week, which means we're on our way.
Yes, just a few more edits, and yeah, we're gonna get it before the end of the year for sure.
Awesome. So that is something to look forward to over on our Patreon when it comes to extra content. We'll have other extra content as time goes on, whether it be other episodes, and maybe we'll think of another series or something to do to freshen things up. I think that'll be something to focus on when there's not a lot of tour time going down. So that's on my mind. I'm thinking about new things to do over there because lately there haven't been this influx of content outside of the reaction episodes. So it's on our minds. We're going to get to it. We'll talk about it. So if you want to help and support us for the time being, just head on over to patreon.com/live on four legs. And what you'll get over there is you'll get every single episode that has ever existed in our catalog. You'll also, if you join up on the $5 or $10 tiers, you will get an episode request that we will do on the podcast probably in 2025 by this point. So get your episode requests in if you haven't gotten one in yet. And that's that. We want to hear your stories, and that's a big part of that. So if you want to tell your story on the podcast, that is the easiest way to do that, to subscribe to the Giggle Egg or the Horizon Leg tier for $5 and $10 a month. Also, if you want to join up and the website isn't good enough for you, then you go to the Patreon app and download that. Search for Live on Four Legs, or you go to our website, liveonfourlegs.com, and you can click the Become a Patron button at the top. Those are all ways you can do it. One of them is going to work, right? All right. Well, that being said, back to the rock. Hey, remember the overhead projector?
Oh, is that a thing?
Barely, right? Like,
Yeah.
this is, I feel like stuff like this has happened before where there have been things that you're like, oh, well, okay, this is going to happen on this tour. And for a couple shows, it's like, yeah, overhead projector, we're going to write some messages. And then they just abandon it after what? I don't know if they did it again after the May leg. I barely remember it happening in Seattle, maybe a little bit. But like the first time that he did it in Vancouver, he's writing like 1,000 messages. And you're like, oh, cool. Like this is a new way to get people excited and consider it being a break without having the lights going down and all that stuff. Like, I don't know. This projector message is very, very simple. Well, thank you, Las Vegas. Louder. And that's it.
Yeah, the last thing that I remember about the projector in Seattle, it was a preset message that it said, "We love you, deep sea diver. Thank you."
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that's it.
Was there a Go Kraken too or something like that?
Yeah. But there was no any messages in the encore or anything like that. So
Ed S. Simon, I guess there was another shout out to a crew member. He asked him, what's the fine? $500. And he points over to Aaron and says, oh, I can borrow it from her. One of my favorite memories here was playing a solo show at the Pearl on Halloween. And then he goes and points out some costumes of himself and talks about like people wearing costumes of him at the show. They were raising money for EB, and a woman dressed as a peacock had a wad of cash in her hand and said, I'll donate this if you play black. I said, well, that's Stone's song. I don't really play it solo. More people walked up the hallway with cash and checks, and all of a sudden there were $3,000 sitting on the stage. And I said, okay, I got to do it. It was very powerful in a place like Vegas where you think it's a greedy town, but people were so giving, had big wads of cash in their pockets because it was Vegas. Money went towards getting treatments and working towards a cure, and that night was a huge part of it. This is one of the first times I've talked about it publicly, and I'm still grateful. The reason why I tell that story tonight is the part that I didn't tell anybody before. That night I took it to the roulette table and doubled it for $6,000. And everyone's like, whoa, no. I wish I did that. Thought about it though. I'm a lucky man in a great relationship with this band. I feel like if I went to gamble, I'd be pushing it. And this song is about a guy who came from the desert. So this is the live debut of A Star Is Born song, Jason Isbell song, second reference to Isbell on this episode, Maybe It's Time. And that'll go into Inside Job and Evolution here too. Now, it's interesting because he had done this one other time at Bottle Rock, and we actually get Bradley Cooper coming out to help him out on that. Obviously, the Jackson Maine from the A Star Is Born movie. And this was something that he did on a solo show a couple of times, a little bit in 2019. So we all know the connections to Bradley Cooper in this movie. There was a little bit where I think Cooper was living with him for like a week and wanted to like study his mannerisms and really kind of take that character of Jackson Maine and put a little bit of Eddie into that. And when you watch that movie, you can tell by the way that he speaks, not by the way that he performs or anything like that, because it's a little bit different country singer, but by the way that he kind of speaks, and it is a little bit of a voice, So he uses that a lot. It's very, very obvious. The way that he looks and the way that he's kind of put together. Yeah, it is kind of an homage to Eddie, but when that movie came out, Ed was like, I don't think this movie's going to work. And he was wrong. The movie certainly worked. I think it won awards that said, hey, this movie worked, right?
I had no idea that Ed thought that the movie was not going to work. It's kind of funny to look at it right now because clearly worked. But
right, he's playing music from it, so.
Right. But going back to it, you can hear more than see, I think, a lot of Ed on that character too.
Definitely. And I liked the movie. I thought the movie was fine. I don't know. I'm not like obsessed with the songs, and maybe because the songs are like a little too, and I love Isbell. Like, let's not say it's Isbell's fault, but the songs are a little bit too mainstream. Like Shallow got so overplayed at the end of the whole popularity of the movie. Shallow was just getting to be a little obnoxious to hear everywhere. This song is fine though. It has the right approach to it.
I like this version. I think it's a good cover that he makes. I think it does justice to the song, but I don't think I can ever hear Shallow again.
Right?
It's been too many times around that time, and everybody's like, sha-la-la-la. I was like, can you please stop? It was like Letterman doing the do-do-do-do-do-do.
It totally is.
It was kind of that thing, because everybody liked that song, and everybody was singing it, and I'm like, don't do it, please. It's enough.
Also, I can't like think about that song and think about the two of them performing it and think about like the way that they were looking at each other whenever they perform it. Like, oh my God, this is so fucking obvious how in love with each other they are. And like, I think it like pissed Bradley Cooper's wife off anytime he was near Lady Gaga. And I don't know, but I think that was just sort of one of those uncomfortable truths where it's like, guys, they're doing it, guys. Like, how do you not have that chemistry on that song and then don't go back there and make sweet, sweet love to each other? Like, that had to have been happening, but that's not really relevant to the Pearl Jam podcast we're covering here.
Nobody speaks to God these days. I'd like to think he's looking down and laughing at our ways. Nobody speaks to God these days. When I was a child, they tried to fool me. Said the worldly man was lost and that hell was real. Well, I've seen hell in Vegas, and this world's one bullet old Catherine wheel spinning still. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die.
Inside Job and Evolution, following up on that. Do you have anything good with either of these versions here?
I have something in Evolution, something new for this tour, actually, for guitar geeks out there, is that Stone is not using a booster anymore. He's using an equalizer pedal for 90s kids. Like, everybody probably 80% of the population listening to this podcast, if you ever play guitar, you know that that's the pedal that everybody didn't want to have because everybody thought that this is useless. But now Stone Gossard has one on his board and he's using it as a booster. So there you go.
There you go. If you didn't know, now you know. Real quick, Inside Job, another one where it goes in with the rarity set, the uncommon songs that are put in here. Inside Job does feel like a treat whenever it pops up. So that's a good addition to the set. And you mentioned Steve Gleason before. I don't think it was until Seattle that Steve Gleason was in attendance at a show, and then he was in attendance at the MSG one later on in the tour. So it's definitely on his mind, I suppose, and just big love to Gleason because Gleason was in a recent accident and it sounded like it could have been a lot worse than it was. So we're always thinking about him, and boy, is he so resilient. He just is, guys. Like, he was not supposed to last this long. 10 years ago when we first really knew the story, we didn't think it would ever come to this, and we're so happy that he's still around and he's still living his life, and it's pretty amazing. So we're wishing him well and wishing him the best, and all good health from here on forward. Evolution 2, I'll add this, is that beginning of this tour, they were just really trying to match the pace of the video. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. There were versions that I saw that are like, okay, you can really tell. This one, I think that they didn't pay attention to it as much, but you still knew that there were still some points where they wanted to get to the hallelujah moment and get to the visual at the right moment. So, all right, now we get an intro here that is an homage to the band who started the residency at the Sphere. I believe Ed attended one or two of those shows. That would be, of course, U2. And the song Bad is the intro for Corduroy. Not a U2 fan. Most of you probably know that know me well enough. I don't know a whole lot about them outside of what there is to know from just being in the music world. So I don't really know this song as well as some other ones that are pretty obvious, but I don't think I would ever figure it out on my own that this was that. But, you know, they never did a Grateful Dead tribute, and Dead was playing the Sphere at this time, so it's interesting that they never brought that up. But Bad is the intro to On Corduroy. I think this is another thing. Certainly added into the list of surprises, and following Corduroy is going to be Breath, but it's not a common occurrence that Corduroy is within the encore. Usually you get to the encore, and if Corduroy is not played, you're not thinking about it anymore. So if Corduroy does get played in the encore, you're like, oh, great to see you. It's great. Yes, we're still getting Corduroy, which is a positive thing, but because we got what we got in the main set, which was a lot of stuff that doesn't usually happen, now that we get to the encore, a common song can feel almost rare again. And that's what happens with Corduroy.
It gives you that kind of like second air. I want to get momentum again. I know that you're not a U2 fan. I like U2. I think The Edge is a sonic architect, but that's coming from a guitar player standpoint. I think it was a little cool detail before the song started. I totally agree with you, though, like, why we didn't get any Dead intros or why we didn't any snippets as an homage too. But it's kind of cool how Corduroy works in this spot. It's just kind of like, all right, we're getting into the final stretch here. Where are we going to get? And then you get Corduroy and you get that burst of energy again before the last four. And especially because they won't come in, I think this is one of the highlights of the show for me.
Yeah, Corduroy is great. I think Breath is definitely a highlight of the show for me. And Breath is something that you'll see come back at a later date. Hint, 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 hint. And when you see breath all develop, I want to give a shout out to good friend Dave Lippman. He's right up in front, and Ed goes right to him and hands out grabbing things, and he shakes his hand. So very, very cool moment for him. Dave was able to be in the front for a lot of those shows, so definitely caught the eye of Ed at this one. And Ed is really responding with this crowd in this version of Breath. Like, he starts the choir on this, asking them if I knew where it was. And that's when Mike kind of goes down, gets a little bit of a taste on the crowd in the bottom in that very tiny space that we were talking about before. Ed goes behind and toys with Josh a little bit and plays with some of his stuff on this a little bit. It's just a fun performance that brings this whole show together and kind of tells you where we are at this point. Like, hey, this show was just about having a good time. It wasn't a lot of like big tributes, there wasn't a lot of big dedications or massive emotional moments. We're in Vegas. Vegas is one of the most fun environments in the world, and they played up to that. And I think having a song like Breath, one of the unfortunately rare songs in their catalog that just doesn't come up anywhere close to enough, putting it in this spot where you would think you would get like a Better Man or something like that, I think really brings something big out of the crowd.
Something inside your head. And help me now. If I knew oh, much more than this. We'll see the
And this is one of the greatest examples how a song works so well, half step down to. It gives you something extra, it gives you an extra juice, but it's a great version. And yeah, the band was having a really good time. You can hear the crowd like responding to that. So I think they did justice to a really good version of it.
All right, closing three here. I think we're going to get into that moment where you know what we're going to talk about in just a second, but the bread and butter and whatever you want to call Setting Sun is Alive, Ledbetter, and Setting Sun. So Andrew Watt has come out to play for Alive. There's a big party on stage. It looks like everybody there is just having a blast with Watt. They're back to back with him and face to face. Like, Jeff has a good moment with him in there. And he gets one of the big solo moments. Mike gets like the first solo moment before the hey, and then it goes to Watt for that solo after. How is Watt's imitation McCready here? What'd you think of that?
It's pretty good, actually. Watt is a very, very good guitar player in his own terms. So, I mean, he needed a little bit more juice, but probably he was going through headsets and amps. So I don't think he had like enough power that he needed. But I think Andrew is a very, 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 very good guitar player. And I think he has a lot of Mike's little things, nuances here and there. But he makes it his own, which I think for me has even more value, because sometimes people can imitate a lot of stuff, but he made it his own, and he had a little bit of stuff that Mike will throw to the mix too. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yep, fun moment. We'll do it a couple nights later, rearview mirror in Los Angeles, and that was a fun moment, and he would kind of show up every now and again on this tour. So yeah, I mean, they were very, very happy with the work that he did, and I think that's, you know, getting him to go on a stage. I believe, yeah, not counting Ohana's and those kind of moments, I think this is the first moment where he actually played at a Pearl Jam show, but I'm not mistaken. Like, that's not, yeah. I know he played on Rockin' in the Free World at Ohana, but I think this is like one of the first non-everybody join the stage moments where Andrew had his opportunity to play with them. And I could be mistaken. I might not be thinking of it at this point, but who knows. So Ledbetter comes, Ledbetter goes. Most nights, this is going to complete your night, but thanks to the wonderful run that we had in May of Ledbetter not being the closer and going in a different direction, Ledbetter is the build-up. And I love it, because to follow Ledbetter up, everybody gets on the stage. They all give a big bow. You think that's it? You think they're done, and you never know. You got 25 songs at that point. That feels like the threshold almost. And at that point, it could have been like Setting Sun might not close every show. They could go in a different direction because they went into a different direction with a lot of stuff for this show compared to the other four. And they go back to their instruments. The lights go out and they're back on to ending the night with this. And I mean, we can scream it till the cows come home as to why they didn't continue to do that. And it would just be spinning our tires in circles here because there's no good answer for it, but we can talk about why it works so well. And the reason why it works so well is because when you get Ledbetter, it's this excitement and celebration of it being the end of the night and having a good night and being there with your friends and all that. It's a very buddy-buddy kind of song. And it's been like that for decades. And then when you started to see that Setting Sun was going to be that song to throw in at the end afterwards, the element surprise is massive, but also what it does, it just gives you some closure. The lyrics in the song are a message when maybe there aren't a lot of messages within some of Ed's speeches. As I mentioned, these speeches at the show are more geared towards, we're just having a good time and telling jokes and stuff like that. But the message of the song to end out on, I think, is so poignant. To end the show repeating the words, "Let us not fade." And it gets you tapped in. You're so gravitated by that moment and drawn into it that it was Pearl Jam doing Pearl Jam in a different way. And they can do that. You don't have to close every show with Ledbetter. I get how it makes people feel, but if you go Ledbetter into this, it feels like a sign of maturity, and it feels like they end the show on a real moment instead of just I don't want to call it a haphazard goodbye, but like, you know what Ledbetter is now. Nobody tunes into Ledbetter for the performance.
I've said this before, but for me, Setting Sun it's kind of like the message that you can go home at ease and you can go home in peace kind of thing. I struggle with the same thing that you struggle with. I just don't understand why the band has moved away from the song and not to use it as a closer. But one of the biggest memories that I have from this year too is the fact that I was able to share this song in this moment with you because we were ticket buddies on the show, and it's this different level of thing. Like, the message of the song is just so powerful, like what everything it's surrounding the performance of the song is. It makes it more meaningful right now. I think that we're not getting that I have the opportunity to experience that in a few shows. And you're right, we can have a whole episode of why Setting Sun is not being the closer anymore, and the argument is going to be eternal, and I really hope that we can get it again at some point, because I just don't understand why the band has moved away from this. I don't get it. I honestly don't get it.
Again, until I'm blue in the face, right? But you're right. I don't take for granted that we got to witness this, because I think that would have been one of the things I would have been most excited for if I didn't go to any of the May shows, is that in September I would have been like, I would like to see this end out of night because I want to know what that experience is like. And even those Seattle shows, especially night one where they did Watchtower and Yellow Wing, like they didn't need to close the show with Setting Sun, but the fact that they did it anyway just spoke volumes and gave this song a set of importance that like maybe you weren't expecting coming out of the record. It also kind of guaranteed for a while that this would be in the set almost no matter what. 10 of the 11 shows, and the one that it didn't show up on was the Bottle Rock Festival. So, yeah, I hope that they can rethink things over and consider this back into the fold at some point in the future. So, we'll see if that happens, but if it doesn't happen, then I would like to see it in the set no matter what. Just keep on putting it on and stop scratching the damn thing because it doesn't deserve that treatment. That's the show, guys. Vegas 2024 is in the books, and there's a lot of great moments from the show. Let's pick 3 of our favorite. Tell us, what do you think?
My number 3 is going to be Waiting for Stevie. My number 2 is going to be Hard to Imagine. And my number 1 is going to be Breath.
Hey. I'm very similar to that. Yeah. Okay. I'm going to go. You said Hard to Imagine is your second one?
Yes, I did.
Fuck.
I'm sorry if you have to change something right now.
Oh, man. I think that was really close to what I had, but maybe like Waiting for Steve was going to be number 1 and Breath was going to be number 2. And yeah, you know what? Hard to Imagine, Breath, Waiting for Stevie. Those were the moments.
Reverse.
Those were the moments. So, all right. Now let's see where this kind of rates, because this was picked as your favorite show, you as the audience. And yeah, I would have thought that night 1 Seattle would have been the pick, but you guys know better than us. So how does that go into the rating here? I'm curious to see where it all factors in.
I think for me, it's a 9 out of 10. I think the show is pretty solid. The reason why I'm scoring it so high is I think this is the first time where the band took the step forward and they decided to scramble those sections a little bit more and just to play with the surprise factor a little bit more too. So I think it needs a lot of courage, just especially because the songs are new to them, even though that right now they have stated multiple times that the songs are just they're playing by themselves right now. But I think it was pretty cool just to see them shake the mix a little bit more, just to see and alter the factor of surprise for this night. And also, like, really close friends of ours in this group has this show so high up that it's just like it has to have a good grade.
Yeah, I'm right there at a 9 as well. I think that it's a good pick, and I think that a lot of people are looking at the set list and saying, wow, here's what we got. As far as like, storylines for shows, I don't think that this was the strongest story show at all. I think you have a big moment when you exchange the $500 and then obviously you're going to pay that off at the next show. And I think that that's something that people will remember for a very long time. But I don't think that there was something that like put it all together for it to be like completely outstanding. If you know what I mean. It's a good show. It's a very good show. And the choices worked in their favor. The what's turned into good hows and whys. Let's put it that way. I'm thinking to myself, of course, that first Seattle show, there were so many nods to talking about their lives and talking about friends that they lost and relatives that were nearby. Like it felt like it was a part of them. And this, again, you're in Vegas, so you can have a little bit more fun. You can loosen up a little bit more, but that doesn't really result in like where the true cream of the crop rise to. This is a very good show that I think was the first eye-opening one of 2024 and definitely deserves the treatment that we gave it today. Okay, so next week, as we've done We're just going to keep you guessing until the day. It will be one of the European tour shows. And I think most people can guess what it is. It's not going to be that big of a surprise because Europe did not go as we expected. But you'll find out next week what it is. And we'll talk about it in full depth, and it'll be a good conversation because it usually is. And we'll see if you'll be there. We haven't talked about it yet, but you might
Perhaps.
be there.
Maybe. Yeah.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah. Nobody knows. Not even
Maybe
ourselves.
So it'll be just a big surprise for everybody once we get to that point. So Europe 2024 next week. Don't miss it. Thank you all for tuning in and for all of your support over the whole entire year of this tour. It meant a whole lot to us going forward as we look forward to more touring and things like that. We're just going to keep doing what we do, and hopefully you guys will be on board and keep listening and keep your patronage up. And we're just really excited to see all the cool things that happen in the future on this. So if you are new to this podcast, this is your first episode, make sure you are subscribed somewhere so you can find out, like checking our archive for other episodes that you might have seen shows from, or just know what's going to drop on the day it's going to drop and get notifications to remind you. You can do that on any of your favorite podcast platforms. I'll mention a couple: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, anywhere else too. Anywhere that you listen to podcasts, they'll probably be there. I don't know of any podcast platform where we're not available, but that's a way that you can support us. Another way that you can support us is going to that podcast platform, rating us the 5 stars, and helping out our visibility within the algorithm, because sometimes the algorithm is funky and you don't want the algorithm to decide to get funky. So what you do with the 5-star rating is you put up a little bit of a writing together and let people know what you like about this podcast and what we bring to the table, so that the next person looking for a Pearl Jam podcast can say, hey, maybe they covered a show that I went to, and I would like to hear that. And then they have to dig through 300 plus episodes in order to find that. So good luck to you all. And hey, if you ever have a question about that, DMs are always open, guys. I would always love to help you out with links and everything like that. So that is that for this one. Thank you all for tuning in. This was a fun one, even though I was very uncomfortable for most of this time because I'm having sciatic nerve problems, which is why the song No Way seems to really be in my mind a lot these days. But, you know, that's, you just got to roll with the punches when the punches are being thrown at you. So that being said, this may be the end. We're here, but not for much longer, although we may be parting ways. Miss you already. Miss you always. All right, sir. Whether we see you next week or not, we'll find out. But until we get to Europe, see you on the pod.
Dogme Shallow, the new Nickelback.
In the shadows.